Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Growth Capital Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Dixon, and today we've got Nick Holland. He is the co founder and CEO of Verve. Verve is providing off highway vehicles with an electrons-as-a-service platform. So think of off highway vehicles as vehicles that are supporting like airports and things like that, that are kind of contained to a specific environment. And essentially, he is providing and building a platform and a system that provides swappable battery packs. So it's kind of an interesting episode because he is an old school oil and gas person, spent his entire career in that. And now he is shifting over to more of a clean energy focused venture. He started the business a few years ago with his co-founder, also from the oil and gas space. So we talk a lot about kind of their journey to where they are now. They're still in the very early stages. So the challenges of starting a hardware focused business, which is more capital intensive than a software business. So we talk about all of that, kind of how they're implementing AI into their hardware and platform. So it's a super fascinating episode, and I think we'll get a lot out of it. So let's get Nick on the pod. Interested in hearing conversations with private equity leaders, CEOs of private equity-backed companies, and startup entrepreneurs where they share their stories about their career journeys, starting, investing in, and scaling successful businesses, and the important role that having the right talent plays in building a successful business, then you are in the right place. Welcome back to another episode of the Growth Capital Podcast. Here's your host, Justin Dixon. All right, Nick, thank you for being a guest on the podcast. Good to see you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your time. So I guess why don't we start off here, give everybody that's listening and watching a little bit of an intro about who you are, where you are, and what you're up to.
Yeah, Nick Holland. I'm co-founder and CEO of Verve, and I'm based here in Connecticut, in Northwest Connecticut. My co-founder and engineering team are down in Colorado, so covering a wide swath of the U.S. And yeah, we are trying to disrupt the electrification strategy for off-highway vehicles. So we're bringing an electrons-as-a-service platform to bring swappable batteries to this type of vehicle fleet. So changing the way that they are trying to decarbonize these fleets that operate in very specific facilities and have very specific tasks that they are manufactured to do.
So explain that a little bit more for myself and anybody else that's not aware of the electrification as a service or electrons as a service. Like, what does that mean, and what kind of industries or vehicles are you trying to support?
Yeah, so I'll start with the industries first. So we typically think of off-highway vehicles as anything that operates inside a fence, whether that fence is hard or imaginary. So think of airports, ports, manufacturing, construction, ag. They're vehicles that were really manufactured for tasks, not for consumer enjoyment, right? And so our beachhead that we've found the most traction in and that we solve the most pain points in is airports. And we do all the vehicles that load and unload the plane, which are called ground support equipment. So, very rugged, tough, mostly just steel frames that traditionally run off of diesel or gas. And we're trying to decarbonize that side of the fleet. And then the electrons as a service is really what kind of our bare bones tech allows us to do, which is swappable batteries. And when you do it as a service platform, we remove the requirement of an airline or a ground handler to have to manage a battery during their shift. We provide that service for you, much like a fueling fleet does today. We're a replacement for that, just electrification side. So we want to be able to pull up to a vehicle, swap the battery out in a couple minutes, and off they go to do their task.
So is this replacing, and I guess are airports replacing their ground support vehicles with more electric vehicles versus the gas and diesel versions? Like, is that like an initiative that's going on?
Yeah. So it's been around for a little while. Most of it started with lead acid back in the early 2010s, and there's a lot of legacy lead acid out there still. And there was a lot of it wasn't necessarily federal, but there was a lot of state funding that went into a lot of this electrification, and then the private sector just started to adopt it. So you saw airlines and airports and ground handlers begin to say, okay, one, we know that operating an electric GSE fleet is cheaper for us to do. and it's more efficient. It's a better experience for our operators. And so you just kind of started to win the capital argument versus just the green argument. And so it kind of took off. But what happens is when you put these traditional electric, big battery packs in a vehicle, is you require it to tether to the grid to charge. So they have to plug in and they have to sit there to charge for a while. Well, if you are in an airport that operates for 20, 22 hours a day, that's a pretty big ask. And especially if that vehicle is, one of the main focus points of how you load and unload a plane. So we wanted to remove that friction for electrification and remove the need for massive infrastructure build out in the airport, remove the downtime associated with charging, and bring the swappable battery into this fleet. So
got it. So for the novice and myself, I've got a Ryobi electric mower. So similar concept, just very simplified, where I'm mowing the grass and one of the batteries is it goes dead on me. I walk out, get the other already charged battery, swap it in, and I go off and running. So is that kind of for me, again, very simplified version of kind of what you're working on? Okay. Got it.
Yeah, 100%. And it's a great point, because what we wanted to do was not be this complex. Most consumer EVs that you see that are swappable, like Neo in China, it's a big platform. You go into like a Jiffy Lube type station, the battery drops out, a new one gets put in. It's a engineering feat, and two, it's a heavy capital infrastructure to support it. What we built is more manually, like your Ryobi. You can manually pull our packs out. We put 8 in the frame of a vehicle, and allows us to operate a high voltage motor for them. And we wanted to make it as small on the capital side for the infrastructure support, and as easy and nimble and plug and play for the operator as possible. So
interesting. So are you partnering with like these equipment manufacturers that are effectively building these vehicles to say, hey, we're going to be your battery replacement company, and so you're building it kind of with that spec in mind of using my example of the Ryobi and how that may be different than another electric vehicle / mower in my example? Like, are you partnering with them to say, hey, we're the battery person for them, so you get the specs right? Or how does that work, like from if you're one part of the vehicle that is swappable, essentially?
Yeah. So eventually that's the goal. But initially, one thing it's really great about this fleet that we really love is that the average life can be anywhere from 25 to 40 years for every vehicle. So within that cycle, if it's an internal combustion engine, you can imagine we're replacing engine and transmissions pretty frequently through that time. People are trying to start to do a conversion within those vehicles. And so that's what we are going to take advantage of. We are going to create an inventory of vehicles that have now our power system, our partner's powertrain, so the electric motor and all the things that help operate the motor and communicate with the battery, and put those into converted fleets, begin to put those out to customers, and then bring back in inventory and just keep churning that while we go to market. That allows us to kind of have the freedom and less friction of getting to market within our, kind of our own skin, versus waiting for an OEM to say, okay, this is the new tech. We buy in, bring it into our facility, right? And I think it's a quicker validation for us to be able to put vehicles in the market, start getting customer confidence, and then have the OEM see us through that lens versus us knocking on their door. So,
and then for the airport operators, you're hiring people to be on site to be this, swap service, because you're not essentially training the airport staff to swap this out. It's similar to like a fuel vehicle where they come out, that's their job, is to fuel this thing up. Your job is to swap out the batteries. So the only additional infrastructure that an airport would need is just a place to charge the batteries, right? Because you're still plugging into the grid. And so all you need is the battery packs. Is that right? Or am I thinking about it differently?
No, I mean, it's a simplified version for sure. I mean, we put around, but you're right on track there. We call them little centralized charging hubs, and you can think of them as battery lockers. And whether they have 100 or 500 batteries in them, it depends on the scale of the airport and how the operations are spread out. But we land that there, and then we land the staff there to then be the mobile support. And then we also have a pretty interesting AI background of our software that tells us everything we need to know about the battery, the vehicle, the operator, so that we are not just driving around looking for empty batteries. We're very intelligent in routing and replacement. So that's a big key component for it. So.
And so how we talked a lot about, and I appreciate the context because it's very interesting. How did you come across this? How did you start co-found the business? Like how did you have a ton of, experience kind of previous to this in kind of this world, or how did this all come about?
Yeah, no, not at all. Me or my co-founder do not come from aviation, but we actually are old oil and gas people. So she was on the engineering side. I was on all other things, non-engineering. And right around COVID, we both came together and decided we wanted to do something on our own. And we threw a lot of things at the wall. We started building a power system that was really modular and scalable and allowed for the freedom of work to occur without the grid. That was kind of the precipice or the initial thesis. And then we met some people within the industry that asked us if we had ever looked at ground support equipment and off-highway vehicles. And it was just, after traveling around airports for 6 to 9 months, it was just very apparent that we were solving a problem that we didn't know existed. So we pivoted the business and have been chasing it ever since.
And so where is the business now? Like how long has it been in existence? And, where's the tech? Where's the traction? Like maybe give us a little bit of update on kind of where you are now.
Yeah. I mean, we're still early. We finished our prototype of our battery power system this summer, and we are now working with a powertrain partner to integrate that into a vehicle for a pilot. So that's kind of where the tech sits. And after that, then we have one more iteration to do on the system, and then get into some small batch manufacturing next year. And then we hope to be in revenue, sometime this time next year is the goal. So still a little early, but we've gotten a lot of support from some ground handling companies, some leasing fleets, a couple airlines, and then a couple of regional airports that are very competitive with each other because there's not a lot that differentiates for regional airports. So they've got to look at any way they can attract airplanes to land there and to service there. So we're trying to provide them new tech, new innovation that differentiates them. So that's kind of where all of our traction is. And yeah, that's kind of where we are.
And so obviously this is not just software based, right? This is a piece of hardware. This is a battery. This is very technical. And so, I talk to a lot of startup founders who are very software based, which, it's a very kind of theoretical low cost to prototype and build an MVP, whereas this is hardware and, longer lead times, longer development time. So how did you kind of bring in enough money or capital to fund this to get it to the point where it is now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, hardware is crazy because we had moments where we're building up our power electronics, which is our secret sauce. And you've spent so much time building up this power electronic, this printed circuit board that you've done by hand. And then you start to test it and one thing kind of pops or a diode blows up and, that's a whole day, 2 day setback, right? It's not just, hey, we need to change the code. So it's definitely a different type of building, but I think it's fun building. So we were lucky that we had some people within our network that believed in myself and Krista, my co-founder, and were willing to say, hey, we'll be those first checks for you. So we really raised what we have to date based on our network. And then we did a couple of outside, people that we met along the way. We have yet to take any VC money. That's obviously going to change for us soon, but yeah, that's kind of where we are. We had some people believe early on that we were building something that was worth putting money and time and effort to. So.
And the kind of capital raising, fundraising point where we are now, we're recording this in mid-July 2025. How has the fundraising been for you of late, being hardware? Are people opening their doors to you because hey, it's something different and not, pure AI, or is that a deterrent because everybody wants to invest in AI at the moment? What are you hearing from, you mentioned you haven't taken any VC money yet, but it sounds like that may be the next kind of hurdle to get to your next stage of growth.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting, man. I mean, I hesitated for a while of putting like any type of AI firmware software stuff on our deck because that's, it's like, the thing of the day, and that's not really the company we are. I will say that we will be taking advantage of that for sure, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that is what you need to do. But yeah, um, hardware funding is definitely hard. You take a list of 1,000 investors, you dwindle that down to 15, then you dwindle that down to 4, and
Mm.
those are the people that you're targeting. So it's not as the work of the diligence behind finding the people is the same, and doing your really focused campaign is the same as software, but the pool that you end up with is very small. So it's a little bit longer because they're such a smaller group. You don't get, I'm averaging like 4 or 5 calls a week right now, which is pretty good, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's also, it's tough to really find people that want to bite hardware this early too, right? We're a little early for a lot of people. A lot of people would expect us to be in grant mode, but yeah, that's just not the route we took. And yeah, so it's definitely a different type of fundraise, but yeah, I think we're finally getting some of the right people in the room. We finally have dwindled down enough that we're starting to find people that have the risk tolerance for hardware and the longer time frame
Yeah.
for hardware. So
Well, that was going to be one of my questions is like, it's typically a little bit of a longer horizon to see some return or even really see some traction with hardware, because you've got to invest the money up front and build it. To your point, you can't just fix the code in a few minutes. You've got to go back to the drawing board, so to speak, right? And
yeah,
it takes instead of days or hours, it takes weeks or months, right? So
yeah,
so
yeah,
yeah, your investor is, a lot of investors are more or more time sensitive. They want things to be done, and get a return faster. So yeah, I would
yeah,
imagine it's a little bit
yeah,
different. And you actually brought up a good point that I was thinking about, because you're kind of working with infrastructure type organizations, right? Airports and things like that. There's got to be a lot of, or potentially or there was a lot of funding available from grants and governments and all that stuff
yeah.
based on a lot of their infrastructure legislation and things that they're trying to build out. Have you been able to take advantage, or could you take advantage of some of that stuff now?
Yeah, I mean, some of that, the beauty about most of the grant funding that happened for airports, especially on the decarbonization side, was it was state led.
Hmm.
And a lot of those states, just because the White House administration change didn't change their focus points.
Okay.
We actually didn't see, from a industry wide, I didn't see a lot of stoppage on the decarbonization efforts. I actually kind of saw maybe more of a ramp up of talk and willingness to do it. So it was kind of an interesting time, right, where people are getting funds pulled, but then this industry is still charging ahead. So I give credit to the aviation folks that are still charging forward, regardless of the of what's going on the federal side. But the interesting thing about the state grants is you need to be the operator, right? So you need to be the airport or the airline,
Mm.
and so when we get to those projects, that is definitely things we are going to take advantage of. I also the one of the other reasons I really love this business is because we operate in these kind of siloed facilities with multiple customers in a facility, but they're kind of siloed. So you can imagine like project-based financing as asset-based financing is a little bit quicker to our needs, and maybe we don't have the VC faucet on for so long and equity draw on our company for so long.
Yeah.
And I guess what I'm trying to get is we're a little bit easier to get into other types of creative financing, even just debt. So I think there's a lot of things that you can do with this business that aren't just raise. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
I
sometimes you get
think
into
you
that
can.
cycle, right? It's raise,
Yeah,
burn,
yeah,
raise, burn. And so,
right,
you
right.
as one of the co-founders, if you're more on the business side, that's pretty much your job, is to go raise money, right? And I
Right.
talked to a few founders where they feel like, they almost need to hire either somebody to raise money for them or somebody to actually execute the business, because, they're so focused on raising the next round and the next
Yeah,
round. And so it's kind of
yeah,
interesting. So it sounds like you've got some different funding avenues outside of just the traditional VC funding that will give you some more control and maybe less kind of oversight in your business, so you can kind of take the path that you want to take. Where do you see this kind of going? Like, what's like the, if you raise money or whatever you're going to do in the next kind of little bit to bring some capital into the business, where will that get you? Like, what's the next milestone for you and the company?
Yeah, I mean, obviously getting our vehicles out into play and showing the world that we can do what we say we can do, and that we've been, beating our chests about for the last year and a half. But that's the big one. So, putting pilots into play this fall, this winter, showing that we built a better product and that's more flexible and more nimble and actually has a lower capital and OpEx. And then from that, gaining operating contracts that will take us into the summer that we can start deploying this, a year from now. So that's kind of the goal. And then, building out a team that's needed, not just building out a team to build it out, but trying to be very strategic in that. And, we've built up a lot of partnerships on this side, because going after an industry like aviation is everybody knows everybody. I mean, I think that happens in every industry, but for some reason it feels a little oil and gas like, where it's, you can burn a bridge pretty quick if you're not doing the right things. You can also partner up with the wrong people, so we've taken a lot of time to make sure that we're in the rooms with the right people, and that they're helping us get into other rooms. And I think we've done a really good job at that. And I think that'll help us be a little bit more strategic on our team build, maybe utilize some of these partnerships for maybe even employees in the field versus Verve and hire. And maybe we're doing subcontracting with an existing aviation group that already operates in an airport, so that, we're not adding surplus employees to an airport that maybe, 50% of this person's job is freed now because of, whether it's an autonomous vehicle or some type of other platform that's come into the airport and reduced their work. We can provide maybe a backfill for that. So I think some of that.
Yeah, and even if you're replacing the fueling side of it, right? If that airport reduces their, natural combustion or combustion engine fleet, and they replace it with these kind of electrified vehicles, you've got a already on-site workforce there that are fueling these vehicles. Could they just be trained on how to swap in and out, your battery packs essentially? And so, interesting. And then do you see this, and I know you're kind of early stage, but are there cost savings to the airport to use these types of vehicles versus, a combustion engine, other than, obviously the green initiatives and things like that to, reduce carbon and everything? But like, is there a cost savings that you see with this kind of shift?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and it's mostly, the operational cost savings mostly come from the airline and the ground handler. Airports, especially in North America, are just landlords. And then they set up a facility and you rent all the benefits that facility offers. And you're starting to see some privatization of that, where companies in the EU and Australia and Asian Pacific will buy airports and, start to see that they can become profit centers. And so there's a little bit of that going on in the industry, but most of it is airports are landlords, and then the airlines and ground handlers are the operational, they bear the burden of that. So, but yes, 100%. The thing that we wanted to do on the outset was, we are a green solution, 100%, but we wanted to be a cost solution. We wanted to come out of the gates either at or below what it costs you today to operate your diesel or gas or propane based vehicle, and even your traditional electric. And one way you do that is you offer it as a service. So then we reduce capital up front because we're getting that long tail of revenue, right? We have a longer time shelf life to regain our capital output. And so that's part of it. We reduce the capital to electrification. And then just an electric, powertrain is obviously less expensive to run from a maintenance side. Electricity is cheaper than gas. And so all of that comes into play. But the big piece, the big differential for us is providing this as a service and being able to drop that CapEx anywhere from 60 to 100%, depending on the contract. So that's the big piece. And when you're in these low margin businesses, like airlines are super low margin.
Yeah.
Ground handlers, super low margin. But they're making a lot of money. There's not a big differential there between profit and expense. So giving them capital relief and putting that directly on an OpEx line, I think is a differentiator for them. And I think it helps us spread ourselves, differentiate ourselves against the traditional battery.
Nice. Well, we have to talk about AI, and you kind of brought it up a little bit earlier in your software. So, to your point about capital raising, everybody and their brother, is putting AI into their name or into their product, even if it's not quote unquote AI. It's a chatbot or something like that. So it sounds like you have some interesting kind of ability to track the battery, usage and power and where it is, and kind of almost, alert somebody that, hey, this vehicle is going to need a battery in the next 2 hours or hour or whatever the case is. So how are you kind of implementing it into the software side so that it is, so that you can talk about it as being an AI, platform, but maybe not over exaggerating it as far as that goes?
Yeah. No, I think it's like an updated version of a telematics system. So a telematics system goes in a vehicle, tells you, 150 points of data, and maybe 5 of those are useful to any fleet operator. But there's a ton of stuff that you can pull. When you do that for a battery system that's swappable, where we have individual packs all over a facility, each pack has to talk to either when they're on the vehicle to our backplane, which then talks to the cloud, or when they're in our centralized hub. And so those packs have to have their own intelligence level of communication. And so that's part of what we've integrated into them. And then from that, you can take all of that data, whether it's state of charge, health, any kind of errors that are going on, heat, depth of discharge, or anything that you can imagine that you can pull from a battery pack itself, putting that out onto a system that then takes that data, quickly converts that into usable data for somebody that's running a swappable power system. That's kind of the AI stuff that we'd like to use. And then I think the other side that I've seen that we don't have integrated into what we're doing yet, but is the routing of that. So you can imagine an airport is a very big moving target, right? You set off at 8 a.m. or 5 a.m. and there's 20 flights coming in at XYZ times, and then one flight is late and all of that is disrupted. So then how do you change your game right away to allow yourself to go and service those vehicles, to know that, okay, now we've got 10 turnarounds in this area instead of 5. We're going to need to swap batteries in the next 25 minutes or 35 minutes. And I think you got to start tracking that over time, and then applying some type of AI mechanism that can begin to see the signals and start to understand how that facility operates, which then will smooth out the operating friction over time. It's nothing that I think you layer in day one. I think day 365 or day 400, it becomes a really intelligent way to map where the batteries go, but also it helps to map where the ground support equipment goes for the planes that are arriving or departing. So, I won't say we have all of that figured out by any means, but that's where I see it going is how do you layer that on top and provide that intelligence? So.
Yeah, you got to have good data going into the algorithm to get usable data coming out, right? So to your point, not going all in on it day one, letting it kind of work out the kinks, and then once you have a trustable data set, then you start to leverage it. I do wish that would be applied more regularly. I don't know how many times, I don't fly a lot, but when I do, you ever get we landed early, and then for whatever reason, you get there and there's like no gates, and I'm like, how do you not radio ahead that we're going to be 10 minutes early, and then we get a guy? Right. I just don't understand it. I know there's more to it that goes into just saying, hey, we're going to be a few minutes early, can you get me a gate? But it's always frustrating when it's like, hey, we made up some time in the air, but bad news is now we got to sit here for 45 minutes.
Now we're going to sit. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. It's tough, man. I mean, it's an interesting dance that airports do. And us as passengers experience most of the downside of that dance, but it is an industry that, is trying to innovate around those areas, and they haven't. There's a lot of companies, a lot of startups that are trying to do that, and there's a lot of places that still run on Excel spreadsheets and paper coupons. So it's a place that is ripe for innovation, and I think they're at this point where they're very problem aware. They're becoming more solution aware and are starting to implement. So.
Yeah, well, that's good. Better late than never, I guess.
Yeah, right. That's right.
I'm curious a little bit about, what it's like, because obviously this is your first company you founded or co-founded, correct? Is that right?
Yeah, I founded a recycling company back in my 20s, but it was a quick. I found a real interesting niche, and then the commodity price of aluminum and paper fell through the floor, and I found myself to be, it was a quick hit. It was
not as lucrative as you thought it was going to be in the beginning. Yeah.
No, not at all, man, not at all. But it was a good lesson. And outside forces, man, they are prevalent, and they can take you down quickly. So
control what you can control, and chalk it up to bad luck, for things that you can't. But I guess as a maybe second time founder, we'll say, but a hardware based company, like what challenges that have you seen that maybe you weren't prepared for or maybe didn't think about going into this? Because obviously it takes a lot to start a company regardless of what type of company it is. This is obviously in a very unique industry, a lot of challenges and a lot of kind of loopholes that you got to go through and red tape and all that stuff. But like what are some of the things that if somebody's listening to this and they have a hardware idea and they want to start it, or maybe they are, what are some things that you wish you knew kind of before you started that, maybe you would have avoided if you did?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think this may sound obvious, but the time in which it takes to build, and even when you think you have it right, you don't, and something is inevitably going to break and have to be redesigned. So, over-promising and under-delivering on those timeframes was something that I think we still struggle with a little bit, not as much because we're not under a customer gun yet, but we are under investment gun, and not hitting dates even early on is something that drives me crazy, right? As a co-founder, I don't like to not deliver on something that we promised. So, but you've got to bake in time for stuff to go wrong. And when, like we said earlier, when hardware goes wrong, it's not a nighttime fix. It could be a week, it could be a month. So I think that's a big one. And the other one is just be patient when you're raising. I learned right away that this was going to be a very hard business to fund. And you just got to stay in the fight, man. I've gotten punched down more than I've stayed up in this game so far for this company. But I think we keep showing up and we keep having the conversations. We keep trying to gain these customers' confidence and, again, control what you can control. Right. But you gotta make sure that you have time for that. Time is the biggest enemy for funding. Time is the biggest enemy for building products. So, bake in extra time. If you're building hardware, make sure if you think it's going to be a year, maybe plan for 2 years.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how many people I've talked to that it's like, I talked to 100 VCs or private equity groups, but then the next one was the one, right? So it's like sales, anything in sales. It's like, every no is you get closer to a yes kind of thing. And, it can hurt every time because it's your baby, right? You've built this thing, you've got this idea, theoretically, it'll work and it'll be a game changer. But it's like somebody calling your kid ugly, right? It's like it hurts every time that you do that.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's never anything personal, right? And
it's
but to you, but to you it can feel like that. And so VCs, private equity, whoever you're talking to, they are in the business of giving money. They want to give money, right? That's their business. You just have to convince them that you're the one that deserves their money. And it's nothing ever personal, but man, sometimes you're like, oh, that one felt a little harder than it needed to be. So, but you just got to keep going, man. I mean, like you said, the next one might be the yes you've been waiting for. So you got to keep going.
Yeah, it is an interesting concept to think about that. You're exactly right. Private equity and VC groups, they're in business to give you money, right? Because
Yeah.
they want to make that's the only way they make a return is to deploy that capital. And, once people start to realize that, I've had a few startup founders who are like, yeah, once I realize that their job is to give me money or give somebody money to build a business that will hopefully then, have a multiple on that, you realize like, well, if that one wasn't the right one, maybe it's the next one, right? So it's just
Yeah.
that
Right.
you got to keep
Right.
that kind of keep moving forward mindset.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I guess to think about the future, we talked a little bit about it already, but like over the next 12 months, if we jumped on a podcast 12 months from now, like what's the one or two things that you would, love to have happen in the next 12 months to then that podcast to be something, really exciting to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we'd love to, have some long-term contracts in place, right? So then we have survivability and something that people can back up on with funding. But I think more importantly is we have we have created a product that can be what our goal is to have very repeatable manufacturing that can be done here in the States minus some of the components that we have to get from elsewhere because we're not doing it here yet. We're creating a few jobs and we're building something that where we believe we are today, even now, has momentum to get really big really soon. I think my co-founder and I always, Krista and I always talk about, we just feel like we're on the fence, right? Like we're just right there. And the fence always moves. It's never static. But yeah, I think for us, that next fence is a year from now that we are about to scale. We have a couple of airports that are functioning with our equipment, and we are starting to look at the other industries that we believe our stuff can go into. So,
Awesome.
Yeah, that would be where we'd like to be.
Very cool. Well, that sounds like fairly lofty but achievable goals
Yeah.
to kind of
Yeah.
baby step into the process, right? So
Yeah.
it is kind of frustrating when you're like you feel like, man, just one domino fell, like everything else would just cascade, and sometimes it's a very, very big domino that you've got to put a lot of force and effort into to push it over. But once it does,
That's right.
then you gotta be ready for that cascade, right? Then you got to be ready for the scale, and that's sometimes when you need partners and money and all the other stuff. So
Yeah, 100%. And I agree, it's lofty, right? And then I always go back to, well, how did two oil and gas people decide to get into batteries for ground support equipment? And we've been lofty from day one. And but yeah, man, I don't know. I think that's what the fun of entrepreneurship is, and trying to build something that doesn't exist yet today. It's not easy, and you got to be kind of big dreams. So.
Well, and it's one of those things where if you don't have to be an expert in something to be good at it, right, and to be the first
Right.
mover, like you're going to ask questions that maybe somebody that's in this space wouldn't ask because maybe they think it's obvious or something, and that unlocks something for you, right? So sometimes it is good to have an outsider's perspective on something, which is also why when you're building things like this, you've have advisors that are in the industry, so they know kind of the what exactly to do in certain circumstances, but somebody that's from a different industry like oil and gas, which is kind of like the exact opposite from an ethos perspective, is maybe you come at it from a different angle, and so that can be very useful essentially. So
I mean, yeah, it's funny because I love the when somebody tells you that's been in an industry, and regardless of what industry we're in, is that won't work.
Yeah,
that's like the beauty. That I love when somebody says that, because then it's just it's a matter of that's the person I want to convince that actually it will work, and and this is a better solution.
Yeah, no, totally makes sense, and I think what you're doing is pretty sweet and pretty awesome, and hopefully it works out, and maybe we will jump on a podcast a year from now, and we'll have
that'd be great.
We'll cheer some champagne, and all things will be good to go.
Love it.
But Nick, man, appreciate the time. I want to end this episode with a 3-pack of questions that I ask every guest. So first question here is, what's an influential book or maybe a podcast that you found helpful or that you would want to recommend to the audience?
Yeah, I'll do a podcast and a book. I mean, I don't know if you ever listened to Jim Rome back in the day. He's a sports guy. But when he turned 50, he decided he wanted to reinvent himself and go after bigger and better things. And he started doing this Reinvention Project podcast. And he brings on some really interesting people that have gone through some serious tough times and have come out the other side, or that are, motivational guys like, the David Goggins of the world. But
Right.
I think he doesn't do it very much. Like it's one every couple months. So it's not, in your face all the time. But the conversations are really good. And I always walk away with maybe one or two things that I try to implement. So I'd recommend that one
Cool.
just for growth. And then on the other side of that is Atomic Habits, pretty popular book, but I loved it, man. I don't pretend that I implemented all of the things from that book, but it made me see some of the things that I waste time on, and maybe caring about the things that don't really matter, and trying to reverse my daily flow. So I think both of those things have been helpful for me over the last few years.
Yeah, I read Atomic Habits a long time ago, and it's one of those books where it's like every year or two you should just reread it because you inevitably fall off the wagon, right? As they say. So, it's always helpful as a refresher. It's not a long book. It's a pretty easy read. And a lot of it is somewhat obvious, right? Like there's a lot of, and that's a lot of business books. It's like, oh yeah, I should do that. But like it just hits sometimes a certain way. And it's like, oh yeah, that does make sense. And you kind of catch yourself doing things that you probably shouldn't do and not focusing on the things that you should be. So definitely recommend 100%. That for sure. All right. Second question here. What's your favorite thing to do outside of the office?
Outside of playing with my kids, which is, the obvious answer. I'm a big golfer, man. I love golf. I love to put a bag on my back and walk 7 miles and, get frustrated and feel good when you hit something good, 1 out of 10, and just hang out with some people and have good conversations and get some exercise. So that's a big relief for me. I don't get to do it as much with kids now, but I love it. And then we moved up to Connecticut, and we've been taking advantage of lake life lately. So
nice.
It's new to us. So I'm getting on a paddleboard and just enjoying life a little bit. So.
It's not a bad thing to do. And Connecticut's not a bad place to do it for sure.
No.
Last question here, favorite vacation spot?
Ooh, that's a good one, man. I don't know. I don't have like one particular spot. We're taking our kids over to the Netherlands in a couple weeks. So maybe that becomes our favorite vacation spot. My wife and I got married in Sonoma, so we love going to wine country. But I think I just love seeing any place. I love getting on a plane and going somewhere and experiencing, especially different cultures. So I don't think
maybe
I have
that's why you fell into airport ground support,
that's
battery swapping industry, right? You just love being at the airport. So why not spend your work hours focused on the airports as well? So.
That's right, man. That's right.
No, Nick, man, it's been really cool to chat. I really appreciate you sharing your story and everything. And if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to reach out and connect, whether it's to talk about your business, to learn about your journey or anything?
Yeah, obviously our website, verve.io, and you can click on a meeting thing, meet the founders. You can schedule some time to meet with us if this is of interest. And then otherwise, traditional LinkedIn. And I think we have an Instagram page. I am not very good at social media. So that is one thing that I need to level up on this year, is to get our game. I've been told that many times, so that is definitely on the list of something I need to get better. But traditional methods of LinkedIn and getting with us through our website is the best way right now.
Awesome. Well, we'll share all those links and everything in the show notes. So Nick, man, really appreciate your time, and thank you for being a guest on the podcast.
Yeah, appreciate it, Justin. It was great to talk to you, man. Thanks for having me.
I hope you found at least one actionable insight from this episode of the Growth Capital Podcast, your one-stop shop for insights from private equity leaders, CEOs, and startup entrepreneurs on starting, investing in, and scaling successful businesses, as well as the role having the right talent plays in growing a successful business. It would be greatly appreciated if you would rate and review this podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe and drop us a comment so we can expand the audience of this podcast. Thank you for all your support, and don't forget about upcoming episodes dropping every Tuesday.